The topic of the alleged Russian strike on the Children's Hospital, for the discussion of which they convened us today, clearly is not a very gratifying topic. Who provided this kind of information, which clearly contradict common sense? If this had been a Russian strike, there would have been nothing left of the building, and all the children and most of the adults would have been killed and not wounded. We have often stated that Russia does not strike civilian targets in Ukraine. The topic of the alleged Russian strike on the Children's Hospital, for the discussion of which they convened us today, clearly is not a very gratifying topic. And they probably saw many analyses of what happened on photos and videos, from which it clearly follows that this was a missile of the Ukrainian air defense. Here you get the magic of verbal gymnastics demonstrated today by Western members of the Security Council trying by any means to protect the Kyiv regime. For us, this meeting is an excellent opportunity to tell the truth about what actually happened. However, the truth, as is well known, does not interest our Western colleagues, and in the best traditions of the Bucha provocation, or with the Mariupol hospital, which was mentioned today, they tried to engage in wishful thinking by condemning the allegedly intentional strike of the Russian Air Force against the children's medical facilities. Now, the dishonesty of this tactic is clear to the naked eye, as was noticed immediately by the Ukrainians themselves, thanks to the video of the strike against the hospital complex, which appeared in the internet, and negated all attempts by Kyiv and Western propagandists. Here are the references of the most full publication. These are QR codes. And here's what immediately after the event was published by Ukrainian Telegram channels, which remain the only uncensored source of information, uncensored by the Ukrainian authorities for their compatriots. And I quote, "The presidential office has instructed everyone to only publish and promote information related to the children's clinic Ohmatdyt in order to A, divert attention from other issues, as there are interesting sites nearby where people could question the government about why military facilities are located so close to residential areas and hospitals. B, attempt to boost the morale of the army and the people by fueling hatred toward the enemy. They claim that the enemy intentionally targeted children, although everyone knows that the rocket was accidentally shot down." This is a quote. C, distract the masses from the daily lawlessness of the government, corruption, tariff increases, price hikes, growing disillusionment, etc. D, divert attention from the constant retreat of the armed forces of Ukraine. E, create additional reason for justifying the conscription in the name of Zelenskyy. And E, create a media hype in the Western press before the NATO summit. End of quote. Here's another quote. Regarding the strike against the Ohmatdyt children, it's quite clear it was a air defense of NASAMS that went off course and hit the children's corpus. Western air defense also often miss their targets, and most often the this happened when the air defense of the Ukraine hit Poland, hit a tractor. If the X-101 missile had hit the building, the damage would have been much worse. We all constantly write that Ukrainian air defense missiles often go off target. There was many such tragedies before, and the presidential office was constantly lying to people that these were Russians who intentionally struck residential buildings. The presidential office has to constantly fuel hatred among Ukrainians and justify the continuation of the war by these artificial tragedies. And the military themselves acknowledge such tragedies are as a result of air defense. This is a quote from Ukrainian sources, it's not mine. Colleagues, I hope now you can understand that no matter how the Kyiv regime and its Western sponsors tried to represent the tragedy as a result of an intentional Russian strike, even in the eyes of regular Ukrainians, the version does not hold water. In these conditions, we really regret that the Council has been drawn into this dirty propaganda campaign of Kyiv and its abettors. And I'd like to ask Mr. Zhovner a question. How he, when he went into the street, understood that the hospital was subject to a Russian strike? Who provided this kind of information, which clearly contradict common sense? Does he understand that if this had been a Russian strike, there would have been nothing left of the building, and all the children and most of the adults would have been killed and not wounded? We have often stated that Russia does not strike civilian targets in Ukraine. And speaking of strikes of the Russian Air Force, which were conducted against military targets in Ukraine and the air bases of Ukraine, one of these targets is the factory of Artem, one of the largest enterprises of the Ukrainian defense industry. This is one of the main producers of aviation missiles, weapons, and ammunition. And this target, according to data based on objective evaluation and based on testimony of Kyiv, of people of Kyiv themselves, was hit. Since the factory is about 2 kilometers from the Ohmatdyt Children's Hospital, there's every opportunity to assume that the air defense missile was meant to intercept the Russian missile and which was meant to hit the factory. Now, such tragedies could be avoided if the Kyiv regime, in contravention of international humanitarian law, did not locate air defense and heavy weaponry in residential neighborhoods. However,